Hello again and welcome back to our course on Excel 2019 Advanced. In this section, we're going to start to look at what-if analysis. This takes us into an area of data analysis in Excel, which has always been a very important aspect of its use. Now, in order to demonstrate what-if analysis, I'm going to go back to one of the earlier examples in the course when we were looking at financial functions, and you may recall that we calculated the monthly payments on a $5,000 loan with assumptions about an interest rate. Now, one of the things we did a couple of times was just to experiment with changing one or two of the values that we used in the calculations, for instance, the number of payment periods. Now, although we did this manually and I used it to demonstrate the use of the function, there is actually a great demand to be able to do this on a much larger and more flexible scale. So if I was working for a loan company and I was doing these calculations for somebody, I would like to have a nice big worksheet where I can just plug the relevant values in and come up with the payment terms and periods of payment and so on. Now, this approach can now be developed to the point where we can actually aim for a particular outcome, such as the level of payment we want to make, and then we can look at alternative ways of achieving that. So essentially, we can look at different ways of achieving a particular goal. And in this section and the next few sections, we're going to look at what-if analysis tools, so goal seek and the use of solver. Now we're going to start with an example of what if. Now before we do, I would just like to remind you of something we did earlier on. Now I have there in column C a set of values. There's the annual interest rate, the number of payment periods, the principal value, which is basically the amount of the loan, and in row 6 in column C, we have the type of payment. And of course, the type of payment determines if we're paying at the beginning or at the end of the payment period. And in cell C8, we have the payment and it's calculated using the PMT function. And we covered that earlier on in the course. Now, what I'm going to do first is copy the cells from C2 to C8. So let's select them. Control C to copy to the clipboard, and I'm going to paste them into the equivalent position in column D. Control V to paste. And I'm going to change the number of periods from 120, so that's 10 years essentially of monthly payments, to 60, which is of course 5 years of monthly payments. So I can now see that the monthly payment I need to make with these new parameters is $93.96. Now, of course, it would be really straightforward to do the same for various other numbers of periods. And of course, we could vary the interest rate and see what impact that had as well. But let's look now at what if and the power and flexibility that it provides. So what I started to do here was set up the framework for the use of what if, and at this stage it's pretty straightforward. However, over the next few minutes you're going to think that everything has gone completely crazy until you see what's going on. Now I put in cell C2 the loan amount and in cell C3 the interest rate, and I'm basically assuming that those two at the moment are fixed. And I'm also going to fix the future value at 0, so we're paying off a loan, and I'm going to fix the payment type as 1. So the only variable is the number of periods, and I'm going to do a what-if analysis from 36 months down to 120 months. Now it's very important when we're setting up values of the variable or variables that they are consecutive values in sequence. Now, one simple thing to do here would be to put the payment function as part of the formula in C5 and fill down. Now, that would work perfectly well, but you're not going to learn what if is if we did it that way. Instead of doing that, I'm going to put the payment function in cell C4. So, equals PMT, the rate, which is C3 divided by 12 to get that monthly interest rate, The next value is the number of periods. Now what I'm going to do is choose a cell at random outside of the table of payments that we're putting together. And I'm going to choose cell A4. Now you might think that A4 has nothing to do with what we're doing, which is true, but it will be. Now we put in the principal value or the loan amount, which is cell C2. Future value is 0 and the type is 1. And you probably won't be too surprised to see that I get an error there. Now getting that error is not a problem. Now we're getting that error obviously because there is no value in cell A4. So what I'm going to do now is make my data table. And my data table comprises the list of month values or the number of periods, in this case 36 to 120, the empty cell above, and the cell to the right. So I'm going to select all of those to make a rectangular table. And when I make this selection, it's very important that I have the period numbers on one side and the formula on the other side. So now let's go to the data ribbon and over to What If Analysis and select Data Table. Now I mentioned earlier on that you need to have your alternative values, in this case the alternative values for the number of periods, together or consecutive. And they can either be in a row or they can be in a column, but you have to tell Excel if they're in a column or a row, and they are the values that will be fed into the dummy cell, in this case A4. So our column input cell is A4. So in this case, what happens is Excel starts at this empty corner. We tell it to go down a column and put the values there successively. So into a cell that we've decided is the input cell to the PMT function. And for us, that cell is A4. Let's click OK and see what we get. And just to recap what was going on there, we feed these values 36 to 120 successively into A4, and then the formula in C4 is going to feed off of those values and fill in that second column. Now it doesn't look quite right yet, of course. We need to do some formatting. So let's go up and I'm just going to highlight these cells and let's do some currency formatting, which looks a little bit better, but I'm going to go a stage further. Because these payments are negative values, I want to show them in red. Now, apart from the rather awkward looking num value there, when you look at those results, you might think, fine, but was that really any less effort than just filling down a formula in cells C5 to C12? And of course, the answer to that is no, not really. In this case, the fill down would probably have been quicker. The idea was to show you the principle of what if, and where what if really comes into its own is not when you're dealing with one dimension of variable, such as the number of months, but when you're dealing with two dimensions of variable. And in that case, we don't need this external field, this dummy field. We can do everything in a way which is much neater and gives us a very powerful way of computing a value in a formula with many variations on two variables. So let's take a look at the two-dimensional version. So again, I start with the PMT function, this time in C5, and those are my starting values, but I'm going to vary both the interest rate and the number of periods. So first of all, I've entered a range number of periods from C6 to C13. And what I've done is to enter a number of alternative annual interest rates. Now what I do is that I draw my data table so that my formula is in the top left-hand corner. And of course, included in this, I have rows and columns. So let's go to Data, across to What If Analysis and Data Table. The row is the percentages that they're going to replace what's in C3 with, and the columns are the number of periods they're going to replace what's in C4 with. So my row input cell is C3 and my column input cell is C4. and click OK. And there we are. That is a two-dimensional analysis that definitely saves some time. In the next section, I'm going to take a look at Scenario Manager, so I will see you there.